You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Well, it's 7:01 p.m. on the East Coast. It is the 17th of December, and time is just running out. Say for what, Frank? Well, nothing, really. But it feels like time is running out. Christmas is just a wonderful thing to behold. I love Advent so much. I love going and just dunking myself into the holy waters of the entire season. But even if you got all of your Christmas shopping done 3 months ago, you almost feel like time's running out. There's no time for anything. And that's what it feels like. But here we are again every night, keeping each other company throughout the rough waters of just wrapping up another year. And that's where we are. It's a nice night tonight. I hope it's a nice night wherever you are. And welcome to the show. It's a Wednesday. It's December 17th. And we've got a great guest on tonight. I'm going to tell you about him in just a moment. But first, I want to let you know that tomorrow night we got two great guests coming in. First, in the first half, we got Zach Voorhees, the original Google whistleblower, is coming back on. We haven't spoken to Zach in a while. And I've got questions about this MIT fusion scientist assassination. I'd love to know what he thinks about that, since he's all into the, big technology and where things might be going. And I mean, that just seems all types of weird. In the second half of tomorrow night's show, Matt from Cultivate Elevate will be on to do a little bit of conspiracy theory roulette. And I like that. On December 19th, that is Friday night, we're going to do our coffee Q&A on the B-sides from Studio B in the morning, the late morning or so. So be on the lookout for that. And then at night, it's a Wonderful Life watch party. That's going to be for members only on pilled.net. And let me just say, 23 people claimed free sponsorships to the show in the chat on pilled.net during the flip side last night. It's incredible. So I hope that I hope all of them are there for the watch parties and the Sunday streams, and check out all the extra stuff on the members only section on quitefrankly.tv, because now they are sponsors. And that can happen any given night in the Pilled chat room. That's how many generous people are in there. But that's, there you have it. Okay, other than that, I just want to get right to it. Our guest tonight is Anthony Rispo. He's a fellow New Yorker, New Yorker of Italian descent. I'd have to imagine based on the last name, right, Ant?
That's right.
Okay, yeah. So Anthony, welcome to the show. Anthony, I found your site. I found your work online from my friend Wendy. And Wendy is a great writer, and she writes for the American Thinker and so many other people over the years, Uncover DC, and she said, you got to check out this guy Anthony, and this was months ago, and I said, oh, damn, this is wonderful, and then when I realized that you were within a stone's throw of me, I said, is it possible? Yeah. Can I get in to hang out? And here we are.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
Well,
thank you, Wendy.
Yes, Wendy. Tip of the cap to Wendy Mahoney. So you provide public discussion and analysis that really combines psychology, politics, social cognition, all that stuff. Tell us a little bit more about maybe just your upbringing first. Do you have a similar backstory as me? Have you been in Westchester your whole life?
I have, yeah. I grew up in Yonkers, actually. Yonkers, New York, yep. And I was there until 15 years old, and then we moved up to Putnam County. Sort of an exodus that happened around that time, I think. At least that's what I've observed. But a lot of people from down county moved up or into Putnam County, so I was one of those people. But yeah, so I went to I'm Italian, like you said, Italian American, and I went to Catholic school, the whole 9 yards, the typical thing that you would imagine an Italian boy going through in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's essentially what it is. I mean, I went to Archbishop Stepanak High School in White Plains.
Yeah.
So I that's where I met most of my friends from Yonkers and Mount Vernon and Bronx. Yeah, everybody's just that's there where it was. If anybody was sent off to the Catholic school there, we were chilling. And that's I have a lot of friends in Yonkers now because of my time in high school.
That's so funny because I was just talking to my mom about this. I had a slip back into memory lane for some reason. I don't know why, but I was thinking about when we moved up to where we are now, thinking like I started high school up there, and I was supposed to actually start high school. It's Salesian High School. And it's an all boys Catholic high school for anybody who's listening. I'm sure most people in the area know this, but it was just comical. It was like, oh my goodness, I was supposed to actually go there. And I was never a jockey sporty type. So Stepanak was not really, I think that was, I could be wrong, but wasn't that more or less like a place you go to if you're focused on sports? Maybe I'm recalling that incorrectly.
Well, Salesian had a really good, they had a good baseball program.
Okay.
I had a buddy of mine that went to Salesian. He was only there for a little while. He's the only friend of mine that I know that went to Salesian. Stepanak had a good, they had a good baseball program, and they also had a good football program.
That's what I was. Yeah. Okay.
And they all played like Mount St. Michael and Fordham and all that stuff around here. But then the other one, if you didn't go to Stepanak or Salesian, you went to Iona.
Right.
You went to Iona Prep in New Rochelle. I think that's New Rochelle, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And then what was the other one that some people went to? Oh, it was a school. It was there was two kids from my graduating class in 8th grade who went to a very prestigious high school in the city called Regis.
Oh yeah. I knew one person. I have someone who did that too. Went there too. Yeah.
Regis High School.
Uh-huh.
We used to make fun of him because because it was like like what is it, Regis Philbin? Or,
I remember that.
I don't. So yeah, that's the way that all went down. But you said an exodus there, and yeah, there really was, because like I told you when I went to go fetch you downstairs, we spent a lot of time up in Putnam County just playing gigs in high school and college in our heavy metal band, wherever we can find gigs. So we're showing up at every bar, every teen center, whatever the hell it was, we were going there, and we often would encounter kids in other bands who had just moved up there recently, all their families from Brooklyn or the Bronx or something like that. And there really was like a kind of a smattering of people were just almost like, go north. Yeah. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Some impulse to leave. Exactly. Yeah.
Impulse to leave before making the decision to leave the state altogether. Because now that's happening.
That's happening for sure. Yeah.
So.
At quite a pace, actually. Yeah.
But you're a musician too.
I am, yeah. I've been I started playing classical organ since, I was 9 years old. That was my life up until the pandemic, really. And I actually did a lot of songwriting before the pandemic too. I dabbled in that. I went to LA. I was going to start a whole songwriting career, if you will. I made some connections, and I, deviated from classical organ performance. I've worked in the church all my life, so that really was my center. Then pandemic came around, and like for many other people, things changed. I tapped into other parts of myself that I was ignoring, and I already known that was the case, that I was ignoring those other parts of myself before the pandemic, which I think is why I started the songwriting, because that was a great outlet for me to express that feeling. And I loved that. I put together some shows. I wrote my own string arrangements. I went, like I said, I think I mentioned I went to the studio a lot, and worked with some really cool people. And, I miss that. but there's this other part of me that I've always had. I remember when I was in grammar school, I don't know if it was sarcasm or endearment, but a teacher of mine said something to me. I just remember her face, and after I'd mentioned something in front of the class, and she looked at me and said, "You're a true philosopher." And I mean, I don't believe that about myself now per se. I mean, I think very philosophically. That's for sure. But she tapped into something that I'd felt, and I think it also makes a lot of sense to my personality and my characterological makeup and just psychologically who I am, because I do have a propensity for deep thought, and which lands me in at the door of anxiety quite a bit. And in order to really think deeply, you kind of have to stay. You sort of it comes with the territory. You sort of stay stuck on an issue and scope it out from beginning to end.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And
Well, yeah.
so I get kind of fixated on things and concepts and ideas and issues. That's always been the case. And I was always the person to want to argue through something to a solution. And a lot of people don't like that. So,
And you also, you're probably the type that has a lot of ongoing arguments and debates with yourself all day about made up situations.
oh, God, all the time.
I love making up situations that, no, I don't. I hate it. Just
I know.
made up situations that you're always,
Yeah.
like,
You're trying to model reality to make sense of it, and then you find issues with it. And yeah, it's crazy. And some people, like, you just have to chill a little bit and take a break. And
Well, music is good for, obviously there's a lot of flexibility. It's an old Thomas Jefferson quote about principles and style. And when I believe he said that in matters of principle, stand like a rock, and in matters of style, flow like a river, or something like that.
Yeah.
Where you need to have some kind of a tether, but there also needs some flexibility there to not be so rigid as to just snap.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's for people like you and I, music is really, really a great outlet, because there's a lot of places where you can just get expressive with music and jazz it up a little bit more. But there's nothing really subjective about music. There's a reason why it gels and why it doesn't gel. It's mathematic.
Yeah.
And there's a stability there that actually takes you out of your own head for a little while.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because it seems counterintuitive to think of it like that, because people would think, well, no, it's subjective because you're telling your story, you're expressing yourself. But if, when you're actually in the thick of creating or recreating somebody else's work, there's a subjective element, of course, but like you said, I mean, it takes you out of, just harping on your own thoughts about something. And even when it is your story in a song, let's say, or a piece of music, you're still sharing that and giving that to the world or to a small group of people. And it's not really something for you to hold on to only. It's for other people to experience just as well, and to run with it in whatever way they will. And that's something we can't control. So that for me is the experience that I have all the time with music.
So do you still perform at all? I saw this post of yours from November 2022.
Oh, yeah, Columbia, probably.
Opening
Oregon.
hymn Sunday, October 31st, 2022.
Oh, okay.
This one first of all, you're not even, hold on, wait. Boom. And there we go. And where's the other one? Boom. All right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I think I performed at Columbia this month. But yeah, I just...
Hold on, I want to play this a second. Hold on.
Yeah.
Now, there's something I got to ask about this in particular.
Yeah.
Do you have to go in saying, I want to play the pipe organ, or I mean, obviously the chords and everything, you have to know how a keyboard works. So maybe the piano came first, but what I realized, and when I really realized this, was when I was looking into the soundtrack, the Hans Zimmer soundtrack for Interstellar.
Yeah.
And when I watched how the main theme from Interstellar was composed and recorded on the pipe organ, what I realized more than ever before was this is a hulking machine.
Yeah. It's
not you're sitting in front of a keyboard and you're jamming out to some Kenny G.
Yeah.
You're pulling levers and the sustain pedals look crazy. What the hell are we even looking at here?
Okay, yeah. So it's one of the most intricate machines before intricate other machines came online. This is pre-industrial revolution, just incredible engineering with such complexity.
There's another one of you.
Yeah, that's at Fordham University. I play a Halloween concert every year.
Wow. See, there you go. You're just
pulling. Yep, I can tell you what that is for sure. And then the students come up and I give them a little demo. So yeah, what you're seeing is multiple keyboards. These are called manuals, and the standard organ will have 2 to 3 of them. The top one I'm playing there is called the swell division, which means it's a very colorful division. When I say division, I just mean section, and essentially the pipes for that are housed in a wooden box, and in front of that box are like Venetian shades, which are also wooden, and they're kind of like open and close like this. And there's a pedal below where my feet are resting, where I push in and push back, and that opens and closes those shades, and it allows the sound to come out into it's a dynamic control. The middle keyboard is the louder keyboard. The pipes are exposed, and the bottom one is sort of like this, similar to the top one. And these are all colorful. All these different keyboards offer different colors and opportunities to bring out different dynamics. And if you're accompanying a choir, you use them differently. If you're accompanying a congregation, you use them differently. If you're playing repertoire, you use it differently. Those knobs are called stops, and when you pull a stop, you're allowing pressurized air to go through a chamber.
I'm glad you brought that up. Where does the pressure come from?
Yeah, so there's usually, it's usually the bottom of or basement of the building or something like that, where you'll have a what's it called? Not a turbine, a wind turbine. Well, actually, big instruments do have wind turbines.
It's essentially like a giant bagpipe.
Well, it's essentially it's a, what do they call it? Blower. It's a blower. So it's just always creating air, wind, and it sends the wind up into it sends the wind up into the mechanism, up into the chambers of the organ, and it pressurizes. It's very pressurized air that goes into wooden boxes, and the air is existing in that space at a constant rate. And then underneath, the pipes rest on top. I should say the pipes rest on top of this chest, a wooden chest, where the air is flowing. And underneath the pipe, there's a hole, like if you're blowing into a recorder. And when you push a key, it allows for a lever to open under the pipe to let air in. And it's very complicated to explain on a whim, but I hope that was...
And it is very complicated, and I have to imagine that during nowadays, we're going to get around to psychology, I promise you.
That's great. That's fine. This is fun.
I just want to learn more about you first.
Yeah.
But when I'm looking at this, when I was watching you play this incredible machine, and I know that the pipe organ was invented somewhere around the 4th century or something like that. It's been around for a long, long time.
Greece, Rome, yep. Mm-hmm.
It made me ask the question that I never had answered for me before. All right, so maybe in the 21st century, you can have a nice turbine in the basement that is going to keep the air flowing. How the hell did they power these things in the 3rd century? And I just went and I found it. old pipe organs got air from manual labor, with people called calcants pumping large wedge-shaped bellows by hand or foot, or using water power from wheels to operate the bellows, storing compressed air in reservoirs, wind chests, which supplied steady wind to the pipes when keys were pressed, a system eventually replaced by electric blowers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep.
So sometimes they were powered by water mills.
Yeah, that's how it originally started in ancient times. And when, advent of electricity, of course, it made it much easier to build these things and to scale them up,
It's
yeah, it is incredible. I mean, you are your own. You're like a conductor at that thing. You have, like I said, those stops. You have many of them, different families of them, and you can program them, preset them with buttons that are horizontal, like sort of perpendicular to you, but like that they rest underneath the keyboards, and you push them as you're playing, and they change. So you get this sonic template that is always changing and modifying, and it's incredible. It takes a lot of time to get yourself procedurally sort of oriented to the instrument, but it is like riding a bike. I mean, if you learn it well at a certain age, especially, then those synapses, those connections are there.
Well, then let's just talk about synapses a little bit more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Just tee that one up.
Yeah.
So, okay. Know your origin story to a degree, and hopefully this is the first of many times you come on the show, so I'm sure we'll be able to fill in the rest later on. But let's talk academic pedigree, because the way people find you, and you've got wonderful subscribership on Instagram, and people really love your analysis and commentary on things. It's very soothing, and but of course, I have to imagine. Are you? What kind of? Have you completed all of your studies? Are you still in the process? Just give me a little bit of background there.
Great question. Yeah. So because I'm 30. I'll be 36 in like 2 weeks. And I because I did like everything we just talked about all my life, music and all that, and because I went back to I guess I didn't. We have to pick up where we left off. So I did end up going back to school during the pandemic for psychology. Actually, it was human services first. I won't go down a rabbit hole and go through all the details, but it was more of the sort of application, bedside kind of work. I don't know how else you would call it, but clinical orientation towards psychology, counseling. I wanted to really help people in that way. But so that was 2020. Went into community college because I needed a lot of prerequisites before I can consider a BA in psychology, because music courses and just a few things transferred, but barely anything to be really worth anything. So I did 2 years there. I switched from that human services kind of mode to psychology. Really got into research, like wanting to follow that path, understand complicated ideas, concepts, and got accepted into Columbia University, went there and spent 3 years there, finished a BA in psychology, and I did an advanced research program where I built my own theses and did some of my own research. And I just fell in love with research. I fell in love with the empirical process, and I wanted to know more about how psychology comes up with different, as you'd call, constructs, like how we measure phenomenon, how we measure attitudes, how we measure aptitude, who's doing that, what are the questions they're deriving, and how do they even put that to the test, and is it all just peachy, and turns out it's not.
Right.
And there's a lot of corruption in especially social psychology. So then I started to get into something called the philosophy of science, which is like how we think about how we do science. And so here I am now. I mean, I just graduated in May, and I'm sort of in a limbo when it comes to academia. It could be that I end up doing a master's, but it also could be that I end up doing a PhD. But And for anybody who's listening who has a PhD, I mean, good for you. This is great. I have many friends who do, but I think that they would probably understand what I'm saying in that it's a rough market. You get your PhD, you're focused on something for 5 years to, in clinical 7 years, even beyond that. And, you have to go through that whole process working under a lab. The funding is not, so you're not getting paid that much. You kind of have to live, at the whims of your PI or principal investigator who's in charge of the lab. And you're deriving this sort of work based on this just, very concentrated question you have. You go all those years, you do a thesis, you defend it, and then it's like, okay, what next? The market it's very difficult to permeate the academic market to get into, to be a professor. So I decided academia as a job route, wasn't necessarily my passion. The world of academia generally is not where my heart is per se, but academic work, and like empirical work definitely is. So that leaves me thinking, okay, you need the skills to do research, but you don't necessarily need a PhD to do that kind of stuff. You need a team, support system, the knowledge. And so that's a long answer.
And the money.
Yeah. Well, PhDs are interesting because it's funny. Master's degrees are harder to some degree monetarily because like you're actually paying for a master's degree most of the time, like basically all the time, unless you could find a cheaper school that is just a little more favorable to your budget. But PhDs, I mean, they're so competitive that you get in and it's funded for, your education's funded, but it's really a cost benefit. It depends on the time you want to give it. For me, I know what I would have to do to build a research program without the PhD, so that's the important part.
The other thing too is that, I knew that was probably a rough path as it was.
Yeah.
And then finding your work and just having you populate onto my reels from time to time and just having you in the mix and all that. And it's just incredible because once again, we were talking before the show, you had asked me a little bit about our history over here and how long we've been at it.
Yeah.
And I made that comment that, there's so many times that no matter how many times that you have to relearn how to do a thing because a platform changes its algorithm or, something new pops up or whatever the hell else.
Yeah.
You got to always be on your feet. But there were so many times in the first 10 years of us doing what we do over here, that we could have, and the pragmatist would have said should have quit.
Yeah.
And because for all the reasons we said, well, if we keep doing this, perhaps it'll open up a door to more conventional ways of broadcasting. Can we get on Sirius XM? Is there any channel on Sirius XM that would give us a show? Could all of the work that my brother produces that we all collaborate on in our band and all that stuff, could, if we do this amount of cover songs and create, interesting music videos to go along with it, will that eventually lead us to signing a conventional record deal?
Right.
Whereas you're talking about the conventional path for somebody to become a professor or something like that.
Right, exactly.
But along the way, I don't know how many professors have 72,000 people who are interested in what you have to say. You already have a giant classroom,
Yeah, that's a great.
It's interesting how that works because we're on, and I just see those kind of parallels in everything, and of course I know that you have a walkaway story too.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that because your academic pedigree alone. I mean, it's rare in and of itself that someone could come out of an American university, let alone Columbia, studying for a line of work that is so overly dominated by Frankfurt, deconstructionist, left-wing thinking.
Absolutely.
And even have a shot at maintaining independence on issues.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Tell us, because you talk about it. You talk about it often on your channel. How what does your walk away story look like, coming from the progressive left and actually being able to reestablish yourself as more independent than anything, on the flip side of all of that college, what people would say, indoctrination?
Yeah. You might actually relate to this, but I grew up, like I mentioned earlier, in Yonkers, and I was not inundated with politics. I mean, maybe it could have been a temporal thing too.
We weren't either.
We were, maybe it just wasn't.
That was for adults.
Yeah, and 9/11, I think, definitely was. I think that changed. It certainly changed the environment, the political environment, but there was more unity. At least that's what I thought. And are those the Twin Towers next to you? Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the degree to which politics was discussed is directly related to 9/11 in my childhood. Other than that, it was not. There was no bickering, and I would, looking back, I think it was more of a moderate take. I mean, it's Yonkers, close to New York City, in a Catholic church. Of course, it's going to be somewhat conservative. I grew up, in a Catholic.
Italians and Irish down there.
Yeah, but exactly. But it was just never. It was just colloquially understood. It was just understood that boys were boys, girls were girls. There was no riff about, it was nothing unusual. And I don't come from a really hard line, political background. My parents were not political, really. My father's from Italy. He grew up in the late 50s, 60s. There was a lot of political turmoil then, and we've talked about how his family took to politics like many other families in southern Italy. But it's just, it was not prevalent anyway. Okay, so being gay, I discovered this part about myself very early on, and I also didn't make a big fuss over it. I went through.
That makes it even 5 times more impressive that you came out of the university system, and you're not like a dyed-in-the-wool Marxist.
Well,
because this,
right.
Forget about it. You're gay. If you have to be progressive.
Yeah, well,
right?
And I wrote a piece in it's called the Columbia Sundial. I wrote a piece, "You're Going to End Up Alone," and it got a lot of attention. It was my last semester there, and it was about this very thing. And I'll get to it. I'm going to index that real quick and get to what that piece is about as it relates to your sentiment about coming out of the university and how I was able to essentially I was unscathed and ideologically. Well, I also attribute it to the fact that I went back when I was 33, and at that point I'd already been out of the left, for about a year or two. But
okay.
So, but I'll rewind a bit. So anyway, in my late teens, 20s, I was finding myself. I got involved with people who were also, they were finding themselves in terms of their sexuality, and a group of us in high school came out to each other, kind of thing. And you just, birds of a feather flock together, and you go to the Pride Parade, you do this, you do that. But I was never really fundamentally, and for listeners, this is important as a through line in my life, is that I was never one to attach myself to groups. I was never a rah-rah kind of group member, fanatic. I'm not saying to be people who ended up in friends groups are fanatics. I'm just saying when I was younger, I struggled with acclimating to groups. I struggled finding consistent friendships in groups. I was better with individuals, and I never had a friend group, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it even kind of crosses into, my father, my brother love soccer, and that's a huge passion, and it's sort of part of their identity, and it's part of a lot of people's identity, sports, and I also couldn't get into that too. I was never a sports person, and I was just never a group kind of person. And to some degree, looking back, now I can look back and think, well, there's a bit of that I could have worked on and should have leaned into more, because it's really good for building your pro-social skills and to be able to just, deal with life on a given basis, interacting with any person on a given basis, I should say.
So then what was this? So then what was the light bulb moment that went off prior? Because that makes a lot of sense that you were already, there was almost like a defense mechanism that was up that probably helped preserve you going through Columbia and what you would, I know a lot of people who go into that situation knowing, hey, there's going to be things I'm going to have to do to pass, and then there's going to be things I'm going to have to do to preserve my principles. And so what the hell was that light bulb before Columbia?
Yeah, so I like I said, I was never rah-rah about being in a group. I never really attached myself, but I did kind of go with the herd a bit, and I adopted progressive sort of prescriptions. I took the pills of progressivism, and I would partake in like certain campaigns or interventions to like get rid of the Indians mascot at the high school. This was during the pandemic.
Oh no!
Yeah.
You were one of those.
I was, but let me tell you something. I have friends that know me from that point, even before that can definitely, who are not progressive, who can tell you what I was like, and a lot of it was dissonance too. Though it was a yearning for trying to find really my centrality, who I am as a person, but I latched onto these ideas because they're virtuous, quote, they felt virtuous, they felt right, they felt like I was going to do something good for people, but it was really about hopping on hopping on the bandwagon, and this was most expressed during the pandemic after George Floyd. Or during George Floyd with the Indians mascot thing, that's where that came from, all these sort of social projects. And, but I noticed, okay, so to answer your question, I noticed that a lot of the people that I was associating myself with in, like, again, this Indians mascot group, and we all shared a Google Docs, and a lot of the people in the group wanted to castigate and really just stick it to the administration of the school district and the superintendent, and it was really mean-spirited stuff. And I sort of chimed in and said, hey, maybe we should lead with a little more diplomacy, a little bit more just perspective, and there was a lot of infighting after that. People didn't want to hear it. They wanted to lean in more, and it was also led by a PhD student at the time in public health, and he's also gay and very white, and it all seemed to click for me that, wow, this is a lot of virtue signaling going on here. And you copy that story and like paste it over to another thing I was involved in New Haven, Connecticut, with climate change, when I tried to introduce the idea of bringing some of the ideas that the group had to the community that actually needed attention as the impoverished community. And at the time, it's still, I have this friend, but at the time, one of my friends, her mother, I think, is no longer, but I could be wrong, was the superintendent of the schools up there. And I said, well, this is a great way we can bridge our work to the schools. Nobody wanted to hear it. Instead, everybody was stuck talking about their pronouns and their genders and this and that. And you could cut the tension in the room with a knife. And I was just, after that period of time, I was just like, what is this? This is crazy. And I was experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance and internal turbulence, thinking, what am I doing? A lot of this doesn't make sense. And so I also remember having tumultuous experiences with family members who'd voted for Trump at the time, and friends too. And I had TDS back then, when TDS was not talked about. I have videos to show it too. I wish I'd given you some videos so we could have looked at them, to be honest with you.
You're brave to even be able to. I can't even look at a show. I can't look at shows that I did last week, and I still agree with myself from last week.
Yeah. But this is like, the chills that you get for your, embarrassment chills. But so I endured that dissonance, and I did some thinking during the pandemic, and I went to the philosophers. I went to, I went back to school, and I took a logic class there were only 4 students in that class. So it goes to show you it's not a popular class because it's hard to think logically and formulaically like that. So I really attribute so much of like my morphing from what I was to what I am now to taking some of those classes and reading some of the fine literature of the past and thinkers of the past. And so that primed me, that really helped me escape leftism, to then go into Columbia knowing fully that people I admired at the time, I don't know if listeners or yourself know who the name, John McWhorter or Coleman Hughes, but John McWhorter is a professor at Columbia, very outspoken against wokeism. Coleman Hughes is very popular. He's, a contributing thinker at the Free Press right now. And he had experiences at Columbia too that he had pushed against and experienced a lot of fallout for that. But I had a lot of people that inspired me at that time. And so it was easier to go into Columbia knowing that I was going to be in the minority in terms of ideology. But I set up a group there. I established a group called Heterodox Academy, which is already it's an existing group. It's international. I don't know if you know the name Jonathan Haidt. He's a social psychologist. He started it in, I think, 2015. And it's for free thinkers, for people who want to challenge ideas, to break orthodoxy in the academy, and to have open inquiry and viewpoint diversity. And so Columbia didn't have a campus community of Heterodox Academy, which is what they call them, campus communities. So I initiated that and I started it. So I was already one of the guys who was starting the discussion on campus about there's a problem here. And then October 7th happened. And the few of us who started these kinds of groups, these free speech groups, went under the radar quite a bit. And it is just now that they're resurfacing and getting much stronger. So it was hard at Columbia because, it is true, there's a sort of self-censorship that happens. But at my age and with the period of time that I went through refining myself and getting myself ready for, questioning the way professors would frame things, I think I had a good time. And I have to say, a lot of my professors were really quite charitable, and I had a pretty easy time challenging their suppositions and truth claims or whatever.
Well, the Columbia in particular,
yeah,
had a very significant relationship with the Frankfurt School Institute.
Oh yeah,
for social research, yeah. And that was back in the 1930s, yes. And they were operating. They were operating on campus until after World War II had ended, and it's just it's crazy, as far as Marxist deconstructionism goes. And yep. I want to talk to you about that because we have to. When you talk about leaving the left, mm-hmm. I wonder, because this is something that we see a lot. What has changed on a principles level for you? Because in new media, especially over the last 10 years, there's this phenomenon of left-wing converts who suddenly become so popular. They almost like I don't know. They're treated almost like unicorns or something. Like
people who left the left or left.
They leave the left, and then they start assuming some sort of I don't know. They want to assume, they show the impulse to assume some kind of leadership position in right-wing circles as if they are Blade, the day-walking vampire where, listen, I know the other side. I'll tell you how to commute. And listen, we all know the other side too. We were children. And I mean, that's, if you were children, you know what people are demanding on, with centralization and right. wanting to assume essentially hand off autonomy to a central authority.
Right.
So the real question is, mm-hmm. what's changed for you on a principles level? Because most people who leave the left, they usually are repulsed by that kind of social structure within within the left, which they realize is actually very illiberal.
Yeah.
And like you said, mean spirited and greedy, and it's thieving. They try to tell anybody it's the haves, the have-nots. It's all about class warfare, race, sex division. It's about just keeping people never wanting to join each other on the dance floor and they stay to your side of the gym. It's like a middle school dance, and you have these OnlyFans models who suddenly change their brand to Bible studies. And it's like this, it's the same kind of a thing. What if your principle, how far to what they would say the right, which to me, I want to talk about horseshoe theory.
Oh yeah.
Because that in itself is something I think is really interesting, because when I think about politics as not a spectrum, but linear, going farther to the right means stripping away central powers, not centralizing decision-making power in the hands of a government that is just as brutal as a communist government, only it's more nationalist than it is based on class warfare.
Right.
Right. Where have you embraced the Constitution? Have you gone to the founders? Like, I just wonder where you went with that, aside from knowing that socially it is very stuffy over there.
Yeah, it's a lot of good stuff there. I mean, to really address one of the first points you made about the converts, that's an interesting one. I think that I'm a little bit of a cynic sometimes, I'm not going to lie. And I think to some degree there's some opportunism there. But I don't think wholesale. I don't think that people who are walking away are opportunists per se. But there is a phenomenon that I think we should probably put to the side that would make sense a little bit personologically in terms of the kind of people who are plugged in to the online social media circuit, which comprises of the very fringe, very small number of people who are actually, quote, influencing. Like less than 1% of people on social media are, hold the narrative for all of Americans. So we can talk about that's called the 90-9-1 rule. And so I think that, there's people who are very vocal and in terms of their own personality structure, probably be a little colloquial here and say type A, more just ready to get at it, and to maybe a little higher in some trait narcissism a bit, not clinical narcissism, but sort of self-congratulatory, and who believe that they can be the face of something and switch off the bat. And, to some degree it's a little dark. I mean, but then I think to be a little generous and kind here, I think that people did get sick of the censorious, kind of snotty at best, and the egregious and combative and evil at worst temperament on the left, which actually temperamentally is quite fascistic in the sense that people confuse we think of political theory, we think fascism equals right wing and communism equals left wing, but we can talk about that, and but really temperamentally, this controlling impulse, this sort of top-down control on people, is something that the progressive left has mastered just culturally. I mean, without people even understanding it or sensing it, it's almost like carbon monoxide. I think people who walked away finally escaped the house before the alarms could go off.
They saw the canaries had gone down.
Yeah, that's the thing, and I think that this will be an interesting study, I think, to understand the personality traits, the temperaments, the psychological makeup of people who, quote, walked away, because I think that many of them, their set point was never, like myself, was never quite that left. And there are some biological components to it too, and of course environmental components that make people think the way they think politically, but it's not a one-to-one. Of course, it doesn't mean that if you grow up in Seattle and your parents are like, you have two moms and they treat you as the opposite sex because you said so at age 2. It doesn't mean that you're actually going to be definitively you are, then therefore, like them, but it maps on pretty cleanly, but like not 1-to-1. But
I think you have a very slim chance of normalcy.
Yeah, that's the. That's the.
Very slim.
If the conditions are bleak, then the chances that whatever is underlying will be expressed is much higher, of course. But the point I'm really getting at is that I think that people's set point was never that far off in terms of and you take away the policies and take away all that stuff. I just think people who walked away were not ever that cognitively rigid, because people should understand that it's not necessarily the phenotype. It's not necessarily the fact that somebody's on the left or on the right. It's the degree to which they're able to be psychologically flexible. If you don't have that flexibility, then you're always more likely to kind of give in to your biases, your impulses, your heuristics. You're going to follow the herd. You're not going to. Your ambiguity is going to be very difficult for you at the substrate level. Cognitive rigidity is a function of a fear or an aversion to ambiguity, and when ambiguity is felt or sensed, people double down on ways to avert it, and that their nervous systems get out of control a bit, and they don't know how to really regulate that well. And so it's why when you come across someone who's very rigid ideologically, it's very hard to get your point across to them because they don't want to hear it. And any little cue to them that seems threatening to their worldview will, set them off, and it will make them revert to their set point, which is divisiveness. So it's really a function of how a person is capable or not of living in that flexible zone of thinking. And I think people who walked away, like I say, once again, they have a higher capacity to do that. I don't think it's because they thought none of my views are left-leaning anymore. I think it's because they just understand the difference between, there's a difference between being convicted, I have these moral convictions, versus being an a-hole.
Well, there's the whole thing. I really wish I had the patience and the ability to really reach out to people, because you want to talk about rigidity.
Yeah.
Listen, my father's gay, and
okay.
he has a he has a wonderful Christmas party every year. But I'll tell you something. When I have to keep, like, who was it? Was it Ulysses that had to put the wax in his ears to not listen to the sirens?
Yeah.
Who was it? Was it Ulysses? No, not Ulysses. It was, who the hell? It was the Iliad.
Oh yeah.
Guys, who was it in the chat room that had to put the wax in his ears to not listen to the sirens? Anyway, walking from one part of the house to the other during one of those Christmas parties with, all very diverse group of people in there is like listening to the Sirens song, where I'm hearing all types of I'm hearing all types of blasphemy.
Yeah.
What I consider blasphemy. I'm hearing all types of shit, and I'm just like
hyper aware.
It's fucked, because I listen to people and I'm saying to myself, there is no convictions here, but there is rigidity. There is no philosophical there's no philosophical root here. There are people who are constantly signaling each other through mantra and chants.
Right.
And the people we deal with every day are very religious. They're very religious. They have actually created a life parallel to, I'm a Roman Catholic, and they've created a life, a calendar that is parallel to that of a church and church life. There's their holy days. Yep. They've got their prayers. They've got their sacraments. They've got everything all laid out. And I think that really where it all starts off with, when you think about when people start getting dragged into this, it is most people, I think it is just ingrained in them that we have really warm, compassionate centers of our being.
Mm-hmm.
And that compassion is often by way of the most insidious types of people out there who might maybe some of them might think that they're doing good, but they themselves are led astray. The compassion that is hijacked through trauma.
Right.
And in our case, you're seeing so many younger generations and older generations that have completely given up all of their critical thinking by way of traumas that have been given to them, ancient traumas. We were taught every year slavery discussions from hundreds of years ago become even more severe. It's like you would think that this stuff is happening now. It is in all of the countries that were originally buying and selling slaves. But, who
they won't talk about.
No, they won't. No, they won't. And that's what I'm saying. It's compassion hijacked through, in our case, ancient trauma.
Right.
And what it does lead us to is times like right now, there are people who have seen and felt enough that they're walking away from, I just can't be around this kind of a group because my heart can't. Maybe I can't articulate what the hell's wrong, but this doesn't feel right. And it also brings us to a point of rebellion.
Yeah. Right.
People, especially when you talk about censorious, people are having a cathartic time right now, just saying all the things they felt like they couldn't say, leaning into, I've always called people retarded. But people are really leaning in because it's like, you know what? I got to stretch my fucking legs right now,
right?
Because it was getting real stuffy. And I always ask, okay, that's the goal of the wrecking ball, to kind of just break up the scar tissue a little bit and create some flexibility again. But then who's going to come in and talk? Like, who's going to come in and actually give people something else? Like, the recent left-wing converts who start becoming right-wing darlings, they're not really pro-liberty. They are, they went from stage 4 cancer to stage 2, maybe. Right. They still don't understand. All their prescriptions would still be, how can the state help us?
Right. It's the same. It's the same ethos. It really is. There's again a temperamental structure there. You see it in the likes of Nick Fuentes. You see it in there people like that. It does come back down to state control. It's how can we get, because you could have all these ideas about what a nation is, and you could be right about it, and sovereignty with the things that I adhere to. And maybe this goes back a little bit to what you were asking about where I am on things. Constitutional, conservative, fundamentally a classical liberal when it comes to, pluralism, individual liberty. And I think that the idea of having a nation with borders is vital. I think having a national identity, having a national language is vital to to preserve your country, the lineage, the future, to give stability, because that's not just fluffy stuff. That's you're cohering a sense of self. It's like when you're a child and you detach from your parents at some point, you differentiate, you distinguish self from other. You're no longer attached to your mother. You start to see that mom is different from me. I'm not one. I am not mom. Mom is not me. I'm disambiguating. I'm becoming myself. I'm individuating, and you form a center. You form an identity. You form a sense of self, and that's. You can see that play out all around nature, different phenomenon systems, and that's what a nation is. It's a set of ideas and ideals and principles that are bound together by values and virtues and enforcement. And I think that the types that lean further into that's when you start to see the pathology arise of fascism to some degree. It's like it's exclusionary to the point of being supremacist and completely deviating from the idea of pluralism and even trade, because you have your isolationists and your nationalists who go so far to overcorrect, where they don't even understand the idea of a system needs to function with some permeability. I mean, you have to have allies in a world that is not going to not be global without you. I mean, you just because you say, you've got to know how to pick your battles. I mean, you don't want war. I don't want war. I'm talking about Nick Fuentes now, who's completely anti neocon. I don't like neocons either, but it's the idea of leaning so far into this nationalistic idea where you completely just become inebriated by this false sense of we're just one little thing here tucked away and we just have to put ourselves first and that's it. And yeah, we should put ourselves first, but you can't forget that China doesn't give two shits about that Russia doesn't care, that there are bad actors out there that we have to scope out and be aware of. That doesn't mean we have to generate favors for all these people all the time at every turn, but there's a sensible way of looking at it that nationalists don't. And at the end of the day, for them, they want to put America first. They want the country to care about them, but they're also the most conspiratorial types who are aversive to the federal government. Like they're not questioning it in a healthy way. They're not testing its bounds. They're not testing its capacities. They're literally saying that it's out to get them, a lot of them. So their pathology is I want my daddy to protect me all the time from people around me in the world. But I'm also skeptical of him, which is like, but at the bitter end of that analysis, like they're kind of like at the bitter end of that kind of expression. Whereas the left, they're so diffuse and they're just all over the place. It's a quagmire. Like they like to pretend that they're diverse and they have inclusivity and that they have tolerance, but they form all these different outgroups relative to this idea of being in the in-group of being a progressive, and it just cancels itself because there's always going to be infighting and there's always going to be differences that they don't understand, that they don't, maybe they do, but they don't accept it, that between groups within progressivism, you're going to have differences and you're going to clash, but the way that they attenuate that is by imposing these false kind of fixes, which are diversity, equity, inclusion. But that crashes and burns because difference is real, variation is real, variability is real.
Well, not only that, it is real, but all of these new subsets of voters and special interests that you're creating along the way, they will naturally cannibalize each other because they don't bring anything to the table other than what their special brand of victimhood is.
Yeah, right.
Where, how historically they have had it worse or just as bad as another group. Therefore, they need a certain amount of attention. And it's not really about if somebody has an idea or a product or a service and they want to make sure that there is as much opportunity to go out there into the free market and ply their trade as anybody else. They want to be taken care of. So everybody's trying to feed from the trough, but there's really nothing that they're bringing to a free market. Has all different types of people who have ideas, who've got their businesses, they've got their lives work, that they're coming to the table and they'll make the best person win. And if it is truly free, then it doesn't matter how, it just brings something to the table. There's nothing being exchanged. It is a growing number. It's like the island of misfit toys, and all they do is get together and think about what they should demand next.
Well, yeah, and then also with Marxism, I think one of the central arguments for Marxism, not for it, but that it puts forward, is that labor is that labor is what generates what is it, value, and that's just not true. It's value is based on our perception and what it does for us, and it changes from place to place, and it's not really a straight line. I mean, it just because you work and you produce something doesn't mean it's valuable to the next person. I mean, it value is relative to the situation, and that's why free markets work. because the human condition rests upon a motivational, infrastructure to generate outcomes that have value, and the long haul, the way that we do that is by working at generating something that means something to our community. And it takes a lot of those in between phases and stages of arduous work and thinking and creating to arrive at somewhere where your output is actually going to generate something that holds weight. And that's often, like, going back to our music conversation, like, often that's like really not up to us to determine if that happens. I mean, you put it out there and you could be the most famous person and it could flop. It meaning maybe a song or a piece of art, whatever. It's not that just because you did it, it's valuable. I mean, that's a hard thing for a lot of these people on the left to swallow. They think that, I worked, so therefore, well, I mean, I don't want to sound cold, but it's just not the case that is the case. I mean, maybe in a minimal sense, you work and you get your pay and you save up and you do what you do.
They're gonna be talking about labor less and less.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you why. It came out. It came out a lot over the course of this last year and a half with everybody, especially when you have people like Jasmine Crockett and everybody, going out there.
Jasmine Crackhead.
Yeah, they're out there shaking their heels, on the stages and essentially making the play, making the argument that that illegal immigrants are necessary because they are doing things that past generations of Americans found they found integrity in doing. And they're saying that these, working in agriculture and all that is below the average American now. And they are essentially making the argument that we need to be able to preserve the right to have our permanent underclass of foreign slaves here.
That's what it is.
And so that's why I'm saying everything that is being asked for is about how can I stay at home? The SNAP EBT thing that happened a few weeks ago,
right?
That revealed and not to say that there aren't people out there who truly needed the help and benefit from a system that is unconstitutional no matter how you put it.
Right.
But there are people who truly need the help that are not taking advantage of it.
Right.
It's there or whatever. But what it did reveal over the last weeks or days of the shutdown there was that there's a lifestyle that has been built upon all of these programs that really are not safety nets at all. And the last thing that people are really thinking about or talking about, there's no labor there. Nobody, they're going to start talking about labor less and less, and they're going to find another reason why to say we need certain amount of things, investments put into us so we don't have to work.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And now there's one other thing I just put out there before I forget about it. Going back to the nationalist aspect of it, I can completely relate. Now, I don't know. You mentioned Nick Fuentes in particular. Mm-hmm. I'm getting more and more acquainted with all of his reels and stuff like that. And I saw the Piers Morgan face off and all that. But I would not be able to tell you policy position wise what he advocates and what he doesn't. I understand because I'm right there with him on a couple of things on how vitally important identity. We have an identity problem far more than we have a interest rate at the Federal Reserve problem, or even an inflation problem. A country that doesn't have identity, that doesn't really put itself in its the future first. The fact that we're not having children or anything else like that. This is that I understand that, but I will say this: that the United States was founded on first and foremost distrust and disdain of central government. And I see myself becoming far more truly isolationist and more inwardly focused, not because I hate the rest of the world, but because if you are actually going to lean into what is prescribed by our Constitution as how the government should work, the list of duties that they have are so small.
Mhm.
And obviously defending the borders is one of them. And going out there and being able to strike a trade deal. Yeah, if somebody's trying to screw us over with a trade imbalance, you can put the screws to them with a tariff here. I understand that's totally on the up and up, but foreign aid's got to go. Everything. So I'm all for a complete retraction of our attention and our resources. Most of the resources we spend here at home are illegal.
Yeah.
But I mean, we at least have got to cut ourselves off from the rest of the world.
I agree with that. Like I've found that to be the case in my own analysis over the past year or so, and on my own volition. I mean, I not only, but I have a cousin, my mom's first cousin, who's conservative and was always still is, but was always just a source of calm when I was sort of a nutty liberal or leftist. He would come with me to performances. We would often be on major highways in Texas when I would perform around the country, and he'd have Glenn Beck on and all these other radio people that I hated at the time, and he'd be like, quiet, just plug your ears if you don't like it. And so, I've had an underpinning of the other side through my, in the back of my head running, and for years. And I think I've arrived at a pretty good place autonomously, thinking for myself that many of the things that you just mentioned are indeed a huge infraction on the integrity of the purpose of our country. And you're right. I mean, the whole idea, I would say the whole idea, but a huge reason for the Revolutionary War was taxation. I mean, was the idea of, taxation with no taxation without representation. And, everything, people get it wrong. A lot of people on the left, especially, that so much of the, free speech or gun laws, like all these things are against, to protect you from so government is not overplaying its game. And it's a contract between citizens and the government. It's not about, I'm going to borrow this idea and apply it in my DEI program. No, I mean, that was never, or benefits, even Social Security, all that stuff. That was never the intention. And so I do find myself going back to that grassroots sort of bare bones, constitutional, makeup of this country that I really do think at the very least, people have to understand better. Like, we really need to teach people the fruits, like the origins of why America is America, how long and arduous it took for the founders to carve out something that we have now, and why people come here to begin with from other places. And these left-leaning people, these progressives, it's like the snake that eats its tail or something. Like, they hate the West and they hate liberalism with the capital L. Classical liberalism, which is really, if you think about it in modern times, is really conservative.
It's like a libertarian.
Yeah. But these people coming from over who claim to hate the West and hate the, yet they benefit from all of it. But that's that compassion that has been hijacked through trauma, kind of a thing. That's a trauma response. Yeah. For
somebody to not see how they benefit and how they have been made petulant for no reason. And that's just something that people hard time breaking out of it. And what you just said right there leads me to something else I want to throw out. So we were talking about, I wanted to get into some social experiments.
Yeah.
Social experiments that I'm sure that you have read about in your studies, that you have to understand because they're really incremental.
I'm a little rusty on some of them.
It's all right.
Yeah.
I don't have all the details, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
The first one I want to talk about is the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything we were just talking about right here, about what, how much do people really understand about the civic realities of being an American? How much do they understand about the actual hierarchy of whatever group that they have been assimilated into, what stances they're taking on issues and everything else, identity, this whole idea of identity fusion.
Yeah.
I am I'm looking at the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is that very identifiable, almost like inverted bell curve.
Yeah.
That has people who talk with the higher levels of ignorance on the subject. They usually have very high confidence.
Right.
And then the more knowledge they gain, the less confidence they actually have. And then eventually they come back around to having gained so much knowledge and expert level that their confidence starts coming back up again.
Right.
But here's what I want to throw at you.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading this. This came by my email. It was a tweet by Lomez, a publishing company. They, I think they work with the Blaze and all that other stuff. It's a national adult literacy statistics from, I think, because I don't see anything here that is later than 2023. Adult literacy levels in the United States reveal a deep divide in reading and comprehension skills across population. The latest data shows that more than half of adults read below a sixth grade reading level, with millions struggling to complete everyday reading tasks. These statistics underscore the urgent need for nationwide support for accessible programs. Here you go. 2023, 28% of U.S. adults scored at or below level 1 literacy, indicating significant difficulty with everyday reading tasks. In 23, 29% of adults scored at level 2 literacy. 44% of adults scored at level 3.
Mm-hmm.
130 million U.S. adults, that's 54% of those aged 16 to 74, read below a sixth grade level, according to modeled estimates. Approximately 45 million are functionally illiterate and read below fifth grade level. 21% of adults are classified as functionally illiterate, unable to complete basic reading tasks. The average American reads at seventh to eighth grade level. Adults scoring in the lowest literacy levels, level 1 or below, increased by 9% points between 2017 and 2023. And then the last one here is in 2023, 46% of adults had a literacy proficiency at or above level 3. I mean, when you think about Dunning-Kruger and you think about how bad even adult literacy is in the country right now, and I don't know, that's a very frightening combination of concepts, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Dunning-Kruger effect is less about intelligence, and it's more about a lapse or a problem with metacognition. So the capacity to think about your thinking, to self-reflect, self-monitor, self-reflect your cognitive state. So if I were to say with certainty, something with certainty, like, did you know that trucks go faster down a hill when, I don't know, I'm making this up on the spot, when your foot is on the brake? I have no idea. Something silly like that. It's not a good example, but and I say actually it's fine because it's what I'm trying to lay out is something absurd. Of course, that's not the case when your foot's on the brake. Hopefully nobody's gonna say that, but it's so absurd. But I'm painting a picture where people who say something that absurd and that's not true, but they lean into it. They just lean. Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like that's that. There are people who, it's a bit of a sloppy example to some degree, in that it's a little more finessed and nuanced when it comes to metacognition, because hopefully someone would be able to stop and think, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. But just again, bear with me with that example. If a person leans into a fine detail that actually is established, empirically or observationally, people know that's actually not what the case is, what this person said. It requires the capacity to think metacognitively, to stop and think about different parts of the claim rather than what you've just taken at face value as the person saying it. And a lot of the times, Dunning-Kruger affect this idea of overconfidence and sort of underinformed or not really knowledgeable is, again, not a function of IQ, but maybe even a function of social reinforcement. You have in the political sense, you have people who are saying stupid things all the time, but that's just it. They're stupid things that they're saying. It's not necessarily that they're not scoring high or low on certain scores. There's some, I mean, I can't remember fully, but there could be some neurophysiological aspects to it where some cognitive impairments where a person's metacognition is impaired that way.
Well, I understand what you just say. I understand what the point you're making there too. That there needs to be some nuance between it all. But when you see how poor there's skyrocketing illiteracy rates across. I mean, this is just adult. But we know that American schools, elementary schools, and high schools are really not doing too well either. Yeah. To say that there are. I mean, in some cases, in some places like New York, they have progressives have petitioned to get rid of certain literacy quotas for teachers, just to be able to make sure that identities match the students. It's crazy shit. Yes. So I'm just saying that even though the ability to, the ability to read perhaps is not level with what a person IQ. Is you'd have to imagine that the ability to read higher than 4th or 5th grade level is going to become a barrier to your ability to pick up new knowledge.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could watch YouTube all day if you really have that, but it's got to be more related than not. I just think that's a little bit of a harbinger, if you ask me.
Yeah, for sure. Critical thinking skills. Those are well, I think it's one and the same. If you're not learning if you're not literate at a certain point in your development, that has a direct relation, a directional relationship. I would say, like, pretty much downstream from that is a impeded capacity to think critically. There's no question about that. You need literacy is very important for that. And writing is very important for that. Reading, writing, all, add up to a linguistic prowess, and that all is just really, that's meant to help you develop how to be a thinking person. Exactly what you're saying. The Dunning-Kruger, I mentioned it earlier. The more you learn, the less you know. And for some people, that's actually hard. They'll lean into their sense of the belief that they already kind of know it all. And that is just a lack of intellectual humility, which is its own thing in psychology. And so people who are able to embrace the fact that they're gaining more knowledge in a specific space, like at Columbia, I got to tell you, I mean, my God, I felt like a smarty pants, before I went there. I mean, not really. I'm kind of being silly, facetious, but I felt pretty on my game before I went there. I mean, I was the president of the honor society, at the school beforehand, and I didn't think anything. I mean, again, being a bit older and also having been through life a bit and understanding it, generally don't take things too seriously. I didn't put much weight on that experience, but once I went from there to Columbia, whoa. I mean, you're talking like 17, 18-year-olds who can just computer science, physics, all these different types of things. And you're at the bottom of the barrel, but you're learning a lot and you're expanding. But the degree to which you're able to deal with that pressure really depends on, I think, your intellectual humility. So people who lack that, there is some element of narcissism there where they're protecting themselves. And so I think you see that a lot with people who maybe are a bit insecure with their lack of intelligence, perhaps, or lack of refinement. They maybe get insecure and then they lean into defenses, and then they just don't learn because they're not open to it. You have to be able to accept that you don't know something. And it's frustrating. The more you learn, the less you know. That's very frustrating. But then, like you said, at the end of the other part of the curve, there's mastery, really, to some degree. You can just reach into the repository of your knowledge bank and really just, you can just draw it out. But that's an interesting one. Dunning-Kruger is very interesting.
Well, what do you think the most pivot? Because I just went through a few. I have maybe a handful over here that we have referenced over the years in different conversations, whether they are planned or just happen that way. But is there any one social experiment that you believe is more pivotal or revealing than others? The one that you always reference or you think is just people need to understand just because it's, again, a way of better understanding ourselves?
Well, you mentioned earlier, you mentioned the Milgram experiment.
Hell yes.
And that really...
Milgram and Stanford are just scary.
Yeah, they're scary. But they do, there's a dark side to these. There's a dark side to psychology and psychiatry, even where we've learned a fair amount through the most unfortunate things. And that's one thing I heard a lot of professors say unabashedly, like, had it not been for those, not agreeing with them, but basically saying, it's a dark thing because we've learned quite a bit and it's kind of a double-edged sword. So the Milgram experiment is definitely one where, you're looking at conformity, and basically people are willing to hedge their bets. They're willing to really go full in on something that even could be damaging or hurtful towards others. It just depends on how conformed they are to it.
Deadly.
Yeah.
Some of the participants in the Milgram experiment, they believed that they were being given orders by a perceived medical authority to give severe or even fatal electric shocks to people, and they were pushing the buttons.
Yeah.
Very few walked away from it and said, "I couldn't do this." They're hearing screaming from the other side.
Right.
Everything.
And then you think about these cults, right? I can't name them off the top of my head. What's a cult that would gather, people and basically do it's sort of a similar thing where people just, there's more selection, but you really have to kind of go in and believe, I guess, the fundamental attributes of that cult. But whereas like in an experiment where you're sending shocks to somebody based on its, medical, I don't know what it was, I can't remember, instruction you mentioned, but there's qualitatively a bit different, but psychologically people become very attached to sense of conformity, authority. They start to identify with the people who do it also. They, it's a reinforcing sort of mechanism to get people to obey. And it's scary, but that experiment is definitely, it's of its time. I think it was in the 60s, right? 66, I can't remember, but somewhere around that time. And I don't know. Did you want to riff off that a little bit, or
just the Milgram?
Yeah.
No, well, we already did. Yeah, there's that. More so what you were saying there too, the Stanford prison experiment, that was big because that was one where you had young men that were assigned as guards.
Yeah.
They were assigned you were either given the role as a guard or a prisoner.
Right. And
very quickly over the course of this simulation, the guards became abusive, proving just how quickly situational power can really corrupt somebody.
Right.
And so there was that. But so when you talk about Milgram, Stanford, those are some of the more like, holy shit, well, that is a great indicator on how people are, the whole just following orders thing can happen very easily. Now, when then you start getting, you take a couple of those, the surface level aspects of those away that require direct violence.
Yeah.
where you're talking about the management of other human beings in a confined system like a prison, and then there's another one who's actually administering electric shock therapy to people. But when you take the other ones away and you go to like the Asch conformity experiments, where you have these people who would, when you get them together, would be willing to deny obvious truths like the length of lines,
right,
in order to fit in with the crowd, and to not part from the majority, even if the majority is leading you to a place that's not true. I mean, in 2020 we saw a whole lot of that, a whole lot of that. Just seeing things, smelled like a rat, looked like a rat, but I'm going to keep walking here because I don't want to be socially ostracized.
Well, that's what it comes down to. I think, I should say that's a big part of what it comes down to, because you want to evade social costs, because if you don't, it leads to social suicide, and we're social creatures, and actually there's plenty of pretty good evidence in the animal literature that shows. I think it translates fairly well in the human literature in psychiatry, psychology, neuroscience, where you have specific metabolic, or not metabolic, but a neurochemical response to social isolation that actually increases the likelihood for violence. And you see this in mice, and I can't really remember the study, but there was this attempt to try to
the mouse utopia.
I don't know if that was it.
Because I was going to ask you about that too.
Yeah, I don't remember that one, but I just know that there's some neuroscience work on isolation, social isolation, and stress, and how that leads to, for the mice at least, to violence. It upticks their violence, and that there's a certain neurochemical or a particular neurohormone that agonist or something that, there's a certain neurohormone that's released during this period of isolation that creates an uptick in violence. And then I think there was a way to diminish that in the mice that lowered their violence levels. So that's actually really interesting research that people won't hear about, because it's like animals and mice. But we do have mechanistically similar, there are parallels, and they, pretty interestingly do have comparative mechanisms to animals. But to just kind of take that and put it back into the discussion we're having about social ostracization, we do have an inbuilt, mechanism to avert, or just to ensure that we're not risking our social viability. We don't want to be ostracized, because if we do, then evolutionarily, you're out in the cold, you're by yourself, you're outcast, and that means death. So people will do whatever they can to maintain their social viability and not pay social costs. And so these experiments, I think the through line is, now I'm skeptical of all those experiments because they're not replicated well. We only see real world kind of fragments of them showing up here and there, but I think we get a pretty good sense that people conform. That's pretty established. It's just, what test are they put to get them to conform more or less? And to me, that's not an interesting question as much as is the fact that we have seen over the many years, decades, millennia, really, how people do conform and what that does. And yes, 2020 was a great example, and now is a great example. And I think that it's reaching a peak, which scares me quite a bit. And I think one of the apparatus, one of the structures that's kind of enforcing it is social media. And I know people hear that all the time. They say that all the time, but that is one of the major mediators is social media. We're so plugged into our silos, and everything we think and feel is sort of made into this proxy, or this like second us, a mini me sort of abstraction of us that we plug into aimlessly, and where we experience so much reinforcement of what we already know, and in this just phone right here. And I think that has been deleterious to our capacity to actually just assemble with people who are not like us. Now, the thing is I can say all this, and we can, and lots of people who are talking about this kind of thing right now could go on a tangent like I am right now about how fragmented we are and how bad it is and blah, 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 and conformity. But at the same time, there's a part of it that, as I'd mentioned evolutionarily, that's normal. We are in groups, we're out groups. That's not the part that's abnormal. The abnormal part is that there's so much fragmentation that even in an in-group, there's crazy shards of fragmentation.
Oh, you mean like conservative new media right now?
Yeah. I mean,
if you want to call it that.
I mean, I think it is. I think people get too stuck on like I said before, the phenotype on conservative, liberal. I mean, humans are humans, and I think that wherever there's going to be contested ideas, you're going to have fractures. And I think you have that on the right. Absolutely, you have that on the right now. How they deal with it, I have my view on it. I think that lots of content creators have done a pretty good job mitigating some of the costs that come with it, like pushing a back against some of the claims about, Turning Point USA being part of Charlie Kirk's murder, Trump's comment about Rob Reiner. Like, there have been some pretty good ways of dealing with it. And I think so two things here. The first thing is something called selective empathy, and the other thing is about social costs. So back to in-group, out-group. It isn't abnormal that we have in-groups and out-groups, and it isn't abnormal that conservatives and liberals or whatever feel at odds with one another. That's not the abnormal part. It's just how really intense it's gotten that I find to be a problem. But the thing is, we are more likely to be empathetic to those who are most proximal to us. Like, we're not really designed to go beyond a certain parameter. We offer empathy based on our bandwidth. Like we based on the people we know, first, second degree, whatever. But we're selective about it. And we actually tend to feel, kind of disgust or even a sense of distrust for people who are not, quote, on our side. I mean, there are elements of that are normal. And again, that's called selective empathy. But the beautiful thing about, I think, this country and our founding principles is that our founding principles stress test that selective empathy. And I think conservatism does a beautiful job at that stress test, because the idea is e pluribus unum. We are all Americans, and this is something conservatives talk about all the time. We're all Americans. It shouldn't matter, whatever, X, Y, Z. And that's a stress test on this selective empathy, because you have to be able to accept the fact that, okay, you don't agree with it, which I don't either, but I'm not talking about you directly, but perhaps this is the case, but that one does not agree with open borders, and then the other side, they love open borders. There has to be the ability to accept at some point that, okay, you come through this country the right way, you're a citizen, that's good with me. There are some on the right who don't even want that, and that's sort of a fringe group, I think, and I'm not to castigate them, but I think that is a smaller voice. And I think to be able to accept the other, quote, in a country like ours with a foundation like ours, is hard, because, like, again, you're dealing with a leftist idea of that, which is multiculturalism, kind of anything goes. But then you're dealing with the conservative part that is, we have parameters, we have a language, we have traditions, we have norms. If you can assimilate and you can come into those parameters, I can stress test my empathy for your difference, and we're okay. And that's what I think that's what our founders really put forward.
Yeah, one of those, what you just described there, one of them has a charter is in place already, and the other is masquerading through no authority other than precedent of bad court decisions and just bad congressional habits, no real authority. And it's essentially a breakaway nation that has just, I don't know, built a sandcastle on top of the ruins of a republic.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And yet that's why, I don't know, these are things that we talk about a lot. And you're bringing up fantastic points. But let me ask you this, because it's 8:40. We're moving along here. And I want to ask you before we wrap up here specifically about your approach to the holidays, because you gave some great advice back around Thanksgiving. Yeah. I want to get you to leave us with some parting shots on Christmas before we leave. But you're talking again there, anything goes, multiculturalism, and then something that is a little bit more of I wouldn't even call it rigid. It's just that there's structure.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I want to bring something up. It has to do with storytelling. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I saw this tweet about, what in the hell was this? It was on December 6th. And it was a retweet. Let me see here. Some person retweeting themselves. Middle Earther Mixer says, the Middle Earth Mixer says, what if I told you, it has the Morpheus meme there. What if I told you that most stories are right-wing coded, whether their creators intend them to be or not? The truths that govern the world and the presuppositions of your stories are real, whether you're on board or not, libtard. and then of course that Middle Earth Mixer retweeted it and said, and then of course it came down to Stranger Things for an example. The irony of Stranger Things, they said, is that it attempts at mocking the satanic panic of the 1980s while simultaneously creating a version of that very reality. The spiritual and physical realms are much closer than we give them credit for. Truth cries out even when the writers don't see it themselves. The comments are actually really great too. The reason why I wanted to bring this up and give you some room to talk about it in these last minutes of the show is because when I thought about that, I said, well, yeah, of course. It depends on how people make things up and what costumes they put on it. But when you really think about it, what is seen as right wing these days are things that have some sort of rigid skeletal structure.
Yeah.
Whereas liberal is something that has literally become formless. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about even just philosophy 101, then you know about the early debates about form, and in just anything that can have some kind of a structure there. If you're going to write a cohesive story that is not some sort of a Sopranos season 6 coma dream, unless you're in Tony's brain, it's a dream, so it's all going to be very random. It's going to have no real plot, no real anything, but it's okay because you're in a man's brain who's in a coma.
Right.
But other than using that formlessness as almost like a plot device, if a main character is in a coma or some kind of vegetative state, you can't tell a story, you can't form a story without being able to really identify good and evil, a protagonist and antagonist, to have some kind of a point A to point B. There has to be some kind of something there. In fact, and you can say that, well, it also, what happens usually is a liberal writer or something like that will take a good versus evil thing and it'll end up just being an inverse, but it's still, as long as there's something to counter, we can see what they're trying to do, but whatever. So there's inverses and all that stuff. I just wonder what you think about that whole idea that if you're going to write a cohesive story, then there's going to be some kind of what would be considered a right-wing construct, because in modern day political dialoguing, anything that has the rigidity of form is seen to be in some way traditional and retrograde and needs to be done away with, or something like that. I don't know. I think it's a pretty interesting thought.
Yeah, I think that the idea of conserve comes into play here, and I think the idea of taking ideas, impulses, just raw material, and then molding them into this structure to emerge something coherent is a feature of conservatism, in my view. I think it is the ultimate coming together. It's form. And I think when you start to look at the opposition, it co-ops that outcome or that idea superficially to posture. Okay, let me rewind. I think about postmodernism, which is a rejection of meta-narratives and the idea that everything is really about power, and it's this kind of dead-end approach to everything. Really, there is no objective truth. There's no true, unifying narrative. There's no parameters, really. I mean, it really just depends on you and your whims and what you think and feel. And then that's the narrative that you follow. And I think that a lot of leftists or a lot of postmodernists, they have an orientation toward rigidity in the way that they operate in their philosophical sort of, like, they'll want their own identity. They want their own way of thinking about things, and they call it, they call it individuality. They call it personal. They call it from a positionality. They call it it's something that they can have, they can own, that nobody else can own for them. And it's through the lens of these micro identities, but that becomes very rigid in and of itself, just in terms of like the fact that these people are impervious to any criticism because they've locked into their own egos, their identities, and they've separated themselves off from any like true north. That is just, forget it. That for people like this, they don't believe in a centrality, a unifying source. That's oppression. I think that for that way of thinking, that is that's a feature too, really, but it's all bugged out. I mean, it's not really anything. There's just diffusion, and it's amorphous. Conservatism, I think, offers something different, and I'm just kind of backtracking to what I said before, in that it's an instrument, I think, for where it's a scaffold where you're taking ideas and they're becoming refined and put to the test, and if it doesn't work with the natural order of things, then it doesn't work. And there's an acceptance there. And I'm just kind of flying off this, just kind of, this is all just coming out of what I know about postmodernism, kind of not a scholar in it, but I know enough to make this claim here. I think that there's a complete aversion to conservatism because it really flies in the face of their sense of creativity, which is supposed to be absent structure. It's supposed to be absent form. Why do you think postmodernists, they find shards of glass on the ground and call it art? I mean, sorry to anybody who's listening who likes that. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, there's a psychiatrist and philosopher by the name of Ian McGilchrist who's written thousands of pages on this topic, looking into the neurophysiology of this very phenomenon. If anybody's interested, Ian McGilchrist. And he talks about the left and the right. He talks about lateralization in the brain and how, postmodernists, sort of hard leftists, show very different activity when it comes to their view of...
So is it all performative for them, or do they really look at a piece of dog shit and say, wow, this is just wow?
There are people who really
think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That it's poignant.
Yeah. And then then you zoom out, and a meta view of it is that you actually do... So people who are like this do score higher in trait openness to experience, and doesn't mean that they're open-minded. It just means that sometimes they could be too open to experiences to the point where everything's falling out. And that's what I think we're dealing with. And then on the right, you have people, they're much higher in trait conscientiousness, lower in openness to experience. So they're more like here, kind of vertical. And you need both, but the degree to which they become pathological. I think that we're seeing that now. And for, like you'd mentioned, the Frankfurt School in Colombia, that idea permeated our cultural milieu, became its own cultural milieu by way of in profusion into the academic structures that we have here in this country, that then downstream from those go into the media, into entertainment, and blah, 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 industry. And it's a soft totalitarianism that is a bastardization of structure, because people feel like they're in control of their lives when they're, quote, individuals, and they're doing your truth kind of mantras, but they're really a lot of the times very diffuse, and they have, again, like an aversion to structure and order. That's why a lot of these people hate the idea of, the family structure, the, traditionalism. I mean, to them, that is just a complete travesty. And, it kind of goes down the pike a little bit more than that. I know
we need
at this point.
We need 5 hours.
Yeah, you wanted more talk about holiday.
No, just to lay down the fundamentals of this, because we're not, it's not. I'm burned out on politics.
Yeah,
and I did not see this as a night that was going to be one of politics.
Right.
I wanted to dive into, how the human mind, obviously we talk a lot about this, how it functions.
Yeah.
But what the current state of functionality is, and where we're seeing, I mean, we understand policy positions from supposed political parties.
Yeah.
I can't stand. I can't do that too much anymore. I dip into it just to make sure what's going on in the world. I don't have time. But this is when you talk about the human mind, holy shit. I mean, but that's the other reason why I think disciplines and structure are so important, because when you remove governors.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about taking the square peg and fitting it into the round hole or anything like that. I'm talking about any kind of tether to reality that allows you to explore different ideas, but also have something to come back to and not float away into space.
Right.
I mean, you can start seeing how this could be a real problem, because all of a sudden you want to sit down and have a meaningful conversation with somebody about something that could be of great cultural import, or even just something that's important to you as a family unit, and you realize you're not even speaking an understandable language, because there's double and triple meanings for phrases that have such deep. It's
well, I definitely I know we're closing up here, but I definitely think if it was at all ambiguous throughout the show, let it not be now. I definitely think, regardless of the fact that I do believe there are problems on the right, and I think that those problems were obviously going to happen, and I don't think it's catastrophic per se. I'm not one of those people. I think it's worth talking about. I do think that the left is an utter disaster and has wreaked havoc on our society and culture. I think, and whatever backlash we're seeing now is a overcorrection, and I'm not saying it's good or bad. It is what it is. I mean, it's an overcorrection for all the diffusion and just the quagmire that the left has left. I mean, the idea that you're now vilified for, well, less so now, thankfully, the more people talk out, for saying that biological boys cannot become women, and that we have to even go there to begin with, is just and then it turns on itself to the point where then now you're actually putting actual women last and undoing their rights, is just a mind fuck, and I think that people are I think that had far greater effects on our culture and continues to have those kinds of effects on many people. But I think that we're getting a lot of people pushing back and saying, no, I'm not, you cannot mandate that I say what you think I should say.
It's at least here, it's a good sign. It's sad, a sad starting point, but a good sign that there is some sort of a rebellion that is happening. And of course we have thankfully a lot more protections that allow us over here in the United States to rebel against trends like this when they start taking root because, of course, of our First Amendment. You look in, we were just talking about this last night in great depth with my buddy Jay, but I mean, people are going to jail left and right across the rest of the Western world, in Europe and Australia for just, I don't know, moderate disagreements with government bodies about migration quotas and everything else. I mean, losing days of their lives because of published, in a sane society, innocuous speech. So it's okay. So before we leave,
That's right.
Speaking about being on different pages and having to navigate a world that's becoming increasingly tumultuous.
Yeah.
You put out a great video just before Thanksgiving about some things to bring with you into a family situation that could be pretty stressful. Unfortunately, there's an old saying that you should avoid politics and religion in polite company and all that stuff. But unfortunately, politics is religion for a lot of people now who have had, especially for the godless,
that's right,
who have had it all
Vacuum.
go.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter if it's Christmas or Easter or 4th of July, any kind of outward devotion to either God or outward devotion to your country. They are especially offensive to leftists. They roll the whatever. But my question is this.
Right. Give somebody some easy, quick nutshell advice about how you can enjoy the holidays without, surrendering too much to your passions.
Yeah, honestly, because I feel like it's not good. I let things slide in person just for the sake of a good time. I try to diffuse things. I keep my opinions for the show and for people who want to engage in good faith in that respect. But when I'm at a family function or something like that, I hate when somebody starts even trying to crack a subject that is going to invite because I know there's going to be nothing but diarrhea.
Yeah.
Nothing around. I know that in certain situations, the people around me are going to produce nothing but diarrhea.
Right.
And I don't want to hear it. And I don't want to think lowly of them for hearing diarrhea. But at the other hand, I feel like you can't keep surrendering the atmosphere to petulant, ignorant people.
Yeah.
Whether they people, you have friends or family, whatever the hell it is. You say, well, Frank, what if you're the ignorant one? It's like, I'm trying to avoid it.
Right.
But again, Dunning-Kruger, the people who know the least, they like to get whipped up about it.
They're overconfident, right? Yeah.
So what do you think? Because
I sort of zoom out first, a little bit more of a philosophical kind of spiritual approach. Just an anchoring thing that I do, a mantra for myself, is just you're not going to change the thing you're thinking about or they're arguing about in this very moment, especially just two people or a few people in this space out of billions of people in the world. It's just not going to happen right here, right now. But to get a little more granular and a little more practical, honestly, because sometimes that fails us a lot, that abstract stuff, that's people don't realize that talking down can actually increase the tension, is to understand that you have pre-conscious mechanisms at play. When you're around a group of people and you get a sense of the room and what's going to happen, you have this built-in knowledge of kind of what they believe and think about just generally speaking, their belief system. So you're already aware of it. You're hyper aware, even to some degree. There are a bunch of processes going on in your brain that don't require your attention. It's just your alert system, your emotional salience network, if you will, or attention system that's signaling, this is important to me. This is something I have to think about. I have to watch out for. And that sends signals to your evaluation, kind of areas where basically saying, what should we do about this? How should we go about it? And how important is it to me to go about this? And that's all kind of like pre-conscious. And then it gets to part of your brain that is important for thinking about, well, what do I do? Evaluating, what do I do now about that? And usually that's the part that gets kicked off, that doesn't come online in those kinds of family dynamic scenarios. Your nervous system activates at the moment your brain picks up that something's happening, even without your awareness. That's step one, is just to know that information. When you go into a situation, know that your brain is scanning all the time and preconscious mechanisms are at play, and your nervous system is going to activate to kick on other systems. And when you start to notice that you're getting perturbed and upset, that's when you have to kick on those executive lobes, the frontal lobes, and you have to. One way of doing that, and I studied with a scientist, a psychologist at Columbia, who was specifically had a hand in this research, which is essentially regulating yourself in these situations. You have to engage in attentional control, which is, okay, somebody says something at the table. Attentional control would be a distraction, like pass me this or that, or the food or a book or whatever, or go to the bathroom, remove yourself, create some space between yourself and the situation to just do enough to get you calm. And then would be reappraisal, which means you're going to then go into the narrative you have about it and reframe it. Well, this person said this, and it's likely that they would say that. And I'm in this moment with this person right now that it's very unlikely that their mind's going to change. And they probably said it because they were activated also. So you're going to engage in some perspective taking and some theory of mind. And it really helps in those few moments to anchor yourself, especially attentional control, which again.
See, my first thought is, how do I ruin their night?
Yeah, well, I mean, then there's that too. But I mean, if you really want a skill to build in that kind of a situation, especially if you know that the family gets hot-headed or something like that, and that there's downstream effects that could be very negative for the dynamic, it's important just to take those steps. I think, again, removing yourself or focusing on another person, asking them about their day. And if you start to feel activated more and more and more, I think, this is all within our control, because we cannot control the dynamic, generally speaking. We can't, So I don't know any other advice that has helped me really than to accept that, I can't control this. That going back to the whole idea of like zooming out, I'm one person, this is another person, we're billions of people in this world, life is short. These kinds of like tropes that you give yourself, these sort of feel good stuff, but they make sense. And then you don't have to necessarily think those things first, but I think the first thing would be to refocus, shift your attention to something else, and then just creating that space.
I've done, now that you say that, I have done that remarkably well in pulling people off course and taking them elsewhere. I would never I have to go to the bathroom for a second. I wouldn't be able to do that because
something doesn't have to be that.
No, I couldn't do that. But I will tell you one thing.
It'd be obvious too.
The one thing that will happen no matter what you do is when you're at home laying in bed at night thinking about all the awesome comebacks you could have had, all the superior arguments that you could have that you have buried inside of you, but sometimes you just can't formulate in the moment. And
I've had that happen.
I know. I was like, oh, I should have fucking said that.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, okay, well, Anthony, this has been a wonderful night with you.
Thank you for having me. It's been really rich in the most positive sense.
Well, hey, you know what? Yeah. We'll do something again in the future, because and I really hope that people go and check you out. Your Instagram is in the description of the episode, and
another thing that people should follow is my podcast. It's _discourse lab. I have a co-host, Clay Smith, graduated from Columbia too. A vet. He's wonderful. It's lots of fun. We have great guests on. So,
well, I see that the Discourse Lab is actually linked in your Instagram bio.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's right there, ladies and gentlemen. You go. He's linked on Instagram. That you should be following the Quite Frankly official Instagram. There's a lot of great stuff there that you don't get anywhere else. And there's Anthony Rispo. So in the Discord Lab, I'll have to go check that out as well. This has been remarkable, man. Thanks for everything.
Thank you for having me. This is great. Yeah.
And everybody at home, listen. I'm gonna see Anthony out, and then I'm gonna put on some music on the flip side. When I come back to the flip side, I'll be hanging out with you guys for a little bit to read your gold pills and all the other messages that came in. Jeannie Yankee fan said Trump is about to address the nation. Wonderful interview with Anthony. Yes.
Thank you.
Jay Britt says, great conversation tonight with Anthony. I hope this is the first of many. Thank you, Frank. Well, hey, we'll see what happens. It's a new fresh year in a couple of weeks. And happy birthday to you in a couple of weeks, by the way.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. If on the flip side, I'll be there with you. We'll tune into whatever the announcement is, and I'm sure that will be central to my my B-sides morning stream that I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I wanted to do some joy scrolling, but we might have to do this instead, and maybe we'll do some joy scrolling on Friday for the coffee Q&A instead. Who the hell knows? But yeah, that's what will be going on. Thank you so much, and I will catch you on the flip. I'm going to put the link in the description of the chat room. Oh, and also one last thing. I just got a text message from Molly at Keto Brainz. She said, also, tomorrow is the last day to order and receive anything before Christmas. So I'll let you know I'll put that out there for the Thursday night show, but use promo code Santa for 20% off of everything at ketobrainz.com, and that'll get you into the big $500 plus Christmas product giveaway with all of the vibration plates and the product there, and then all the local goodies from Montana and stuff like that. So use promo code Santa. That's 20% off. And if you want any Keto Brainz samples of the greatest nootropic creamer out there for your coffee or whatever else you want to add it to, email me, Frank at quitefrankly.tv, because all the new samples are in. So if you have been waiting for yours the last few weeks or 3 weeks or so, they've all gone out now. So you should be able to have that. You can put it in your Christmas morning coffee and dunk your Darals in there. So there you go. All right. Anthony, again, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys and gals, I'll catch you on the flip. It's not what I meant to do. Sorry.
I'll catch you on the flip side.
Okay, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Quite Frankly is filmed before a live studio audience, and tonight's flip side is going to be put into the chat room right now. Please come join us, and we will dig through whatever breaking news is about to happen, and until the night goes into the night, the later nights. Goodbye.
Will you shut